Hi, I'm Mana Moini, and you're listening to the Humanity Podcast. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Humanity Podcast. I'm your host, Mana Moini. Today's guest is a life coach. He's also the host of his own successful podcast called Star of the Ego, Feed the Soul. I want to welcome Nico Barraza to the show. Nico, thank you for being here.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure.
So you and I don't know each other, but I have been following your work, following you on Instagram for a couple of years. And what I really admire about you is your authenticity and sharing the ups, the downs, the journey. And I do see the passion you have for wanting people to love themselves and better themselves in a way that they can better give to their relationships. So I think today's conversation is really going to resonate with this community as we talk about how do we be kind to ourselves so that we can show up as the best version of ourselves. Can you tell the listeners a little bit about yourself and just how you got into coaching and why it's important to you?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thank you for like the kind words. I definitely am very passionate about not just the work I do, but who I am as a human being. And I guess the space I'm coming from that I think a lot of people align with, and you use the word authenticity, is really the fact that like I'm a human being who has made plenty of mistakes, will continue to make mistakes, who has been hurt, who has caused pain, who has hurt others. And how do we navigate that through life and become better to ourselves, become better partners? And it's really about being honest about, you know, where you are, where you've been, where you come from, and where you want to go. And so that kind of relates to how I got into coaching. I was a pro athlete for about 7.5 years. And I was in a big cycling crash in 2019. I had a pretty severe traumatic brain injury, and then I tore all the ligaments in my dominant right arm. So I went from traveling the world as a 29-year-old. I was in a relationship at the time, had every intention on proposing to this woman that I was with at the time. We'd been together for about a year and a half, and the crash really changed my life in like a blink of an eye. Couldn't really walk very well, had all the classical traumatic brain injury symptoms, like kind of changed my personality in the instance, lost my identity, lost my most of my income, and then lost really my ability to what I view is just relate to earth. Like I'm a very physically active human being, gifted with a lot of athletic ability, but it's just like how I experienced life, or how I had experienced life up until that point. um and then shortly after the crash, I lost my partner. She decided to leave and we split up. And this kind of is what propelled me into counseling. Although if I backtrack, truly what brought me to it was mostly my childhood, but also when I went through my first real heartbreak when I was 23 years old, I actually took myself to counseling and therapy for the first time. Um, and that really opened my eyes to, one, the fact that like I came from a loving family that also gave me a lot of trauma, and there was also a lot of unhealthiness. I think we can sort of paint people in very rose colored glasses, because we love them and we want to we want to feel we come from good people. But then when you're really honest, you're like, even being a good person doesn't mean you don't do hurtful things, right? The two just exist simultaneously. And so that therapy experience, I was in therapy probably for 2 or 3 years at that time with that one therapist, really really changed my view on my about myself as a young man. I knew I had a lot of stuff to work on, still do. And I'm 34 now, going on 35. And so that first experience, plus the crash, plus the separation at the time, kind of propelled me to pursue another master's degree in clinical mental health counseling. And I never practiced under a license. It wasn't my goal to work as a licensed therapist, because that limits you to certain states and limits you to certain governing boards. And I agreed with maybe half of the things I learned in counseling in school. The DSM-5, for instance, like there's a lot of awesome things about it, but I disagree with some of the things in it too. And so really, I just wanted to practice my own sort of philosophies with people. And at the end of the day, I think the results sort of speak for themselves. People come to me really when they're really ready to work on their shit, and they're really ready to stop making excuses, and they're tired of going into therapy and someone holding their hand and saying, "Hey, I'm sorry you feel that way." That serves a purpose for a time, but ultimately you get to a point in your life where you're spending a lot of money and you're not getting a lot of results, and you're wondering like, what the heck am I doing wrong? Well, the only person that's going to change stuff really after this door closes and you walk outside, whether it's a Zoom room or in-person therapy, is what you do, how you hold yourself accountable outside. And that is particularly hard with as adults, because we become very ingrained in our patterns, in our excuse making, right? And so that's how I got into therapy, sort of long-winded answer there, but through my own pain, through my own suffering, through the mistakes I've made as a young man, and then getting into a place where I want to help support others just like I've been supported. I think the greatest thing you can do is give the gifts that you've been given. I know it sounds cliche, but it's kind of how it started.
I love what you said. It's like sometimes you don't need a degree. We just need kind of the experiences we've been through. And I think to hear your story and how you took something that changed your life completely and catapulted it into healing yourself and helping others heal, I think is really amazing. Is there, and I don't know if you get asked this a lot, but is there like a common theme amongst the people that come to you um, looking for help or looking to better themselves? Like, is it trauma related? Is it self-love issues? Like, is there like a top one or two themes that you see a lot? And why do you think that is?
Yeah, so I think everything's trauma related. I think how we relate is trauma related. How we have sex is trauma related. How we communicate is trauma related. Particularly in times that are when we're triggered, right? I mean, it's quite easy to communicate to someone that's making you happy. It's really hard to communicate to someone that's not. You know, I think so. So the type of person that really I think comes to work with me is kind of the person I just described. Is just someone who's really sort of fed up with their own way of relating in the world. So if they've been through a lot of relationships and they've consistently said, "Oh, my ex-partner was a narcissist," or "I dated a bunch of horrible people," I'm like, well, at some point you love these people. And so at some point they were really good people. And so what happened, right? Was it just
Right.
them? They changed. They just became horrible people, right? All of a sudden they just became a narcissist. Um, Probably not. And also the other thing is like, I don't believe that someone can just say, well, the only mistake I made is I just didn't see the red flags. I'm like, that's very much like putting the accountability on a shelf and saying, that's the mistake I made is I just didn't see a red flag. I'm like, nah, not really. There's more in there, right? Let's dig deeper. And the people that come to me are the ones that want to really look inside and look at how their childhood, how their parents affected, how they relate, grandparents, anyone that they've come in contact with, how they're maybe they're experiencing bullying, or maybe they have a lot of self-judgment, maybe they had an eating disorder, all these things that like build our inner psyche, and then we attach to them like depression, anxiety, right? These different things. And then my work as a counselor is to help them realize that it's the attachment to those things that's making them you can detach from it, right? And that's pattern breaking and changing behavior, and that takes an incredible amount of work. And as anyone that knows, like, whatever we can call it, delta science or change behavior science, is really like, you first have to be aware that there is an issue, so you have to have accountability. That's the biggest hurdle, is like, okay, it is not the other person's responsibility. It is mine. I'm saying yes to this relationship. I'm saying yes to this job. I am saying yes to having children or not having children. I'm saying yes to this, whatever it is, right? And also then be able to change the patterns that are keeping you stuck in that sort of dynamic, right? And that can be in loving relationship. It can be in a family dynamic with your parents, with your kids. It could be in a job, in your profession. So I think people come to me that really want to start to change. They want to take on the onus and take on the honor and the courage and say, yeah, it's on me. No one's going to do this work for me, right? I'm not going to read a self-help book. I'm not going to listen to an Esther Perel talk, or I'm not going to listen to a, whatever, like some philosopher talk and just immediately change. Sure, it's great to have that information. These are great teachers and guides, if you will, but they're not doing the work for you. You can read as many Eckhart Tolle books as you want. You can read it backwards and forwards and never change. It make you feel better, right? But you have to actually practice those principles in your day-to-day life, and that is the work, and that's really freaking hard. And so I think that's why people come with me, because it's like sort of a coach or a counselor. I prefer to be called counselor just because like coaching can be misconstrued these days, because a lot of people calling themselves life coach. Like, you can just wake up out of bed today and be like, I'm a life coach. I'm going to put a package together on the internet and sell it for $500, and come here and I have these 5 tips on how to get over a breakup and this and shit. That's not what I do. It's about the relationship with the person. Like actual therapy. It's about getting to know them getting to know myself, and we share this journey together. Because I'm not standing above them from like a ivory tower saying like, I know all these things. I'm a human being that's also made mistakes, and I might be able to relate to yours. I might not, but let's talk about them together, and I'll share a little bit about my story with you, and let's work on it, because you want to be better, and so do I. I think
Sure.
that's really what good therapy involves. It's not like coming from a hierarchy of like, I know all the answers to your problems. I don't, but I think you do, if we really get down to the bottom of it.
You use the word trigger, which I know you just posted about on social media, I think last night, which really resonated with me because I just had this conversation with a friend. And the quote you posted was something like, just because you're triggered doesn't mean the other person is wrong. So taking that accountability to look within ourselves of like, why am I triggered? Do you think we use the word triggered frivolously in our society these days? And what's just your thought in general on taking accountability with triggers
Yeah.
versus putting the blame on others?
Okay, this is a great question. It's a two-part question. So let's talk about the first. So why did the word trigger become mainstream? Well, it's like anything, Instagram in the past, especially during COVID, people really had a lot of time at home. They started to look at accounts, and those accounts started to grow more. And we started to give airtime to people like therapists or PsyDs or mental health practitioners more so than even before 2019, right? Which is a good thing because we're talking about it more. However, what our culture likes to do is we like to attach to things that keep us stuck in an area of victimhood. Because why? We feel safe and secure in that area. It's a false sense of safety, but we feel safe and secure because we don't look at ourselves. We don't look at ourselves as the oppressor or as the person that's the aggressor or the abuser. No, 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 no. I don't want to label myself those things, right? I'm a hero. I'm a hero in my journey. And so therefore I have to be a victim because everyone has done this shit to me. And that's why I'm suffering. Right. And and I'm not here victim shaming. It's not what I intend to do. Most of us have been a victim on some level, some more than others, depending on the severity of what we've experienced. But put all those things aside, and ultimately, what are you going to do with it now? Is the question, right? And so the word trigger has been used to sort of propagate this response mechanism that makes it okay to avoid the actual work and just consistently focus on the pain, right? And just consistently focus on something you disagree with, particularly in this like political and social climate where like if someone doesn't agree, like if someone says something and I don't agree with it, all of a sudden they owe me an apology. No, that's not how it works, right? Like if they didn't do something to you like that wasn't intentionally hurtful or they didn't like try to hurt you, perhaps like your trigger is just your shadow speaking up and no one owes you an apology. You need to work on that, right? There's such a thing as being overly sensitive and then like trying to force society to tiptoe around your sensitivity or emotional volatility or your inability to even take criticism, right? And of course, there's a reality of someone really hurting your feelings and you really being hurt, and then that person has to apologize to you. But asking for an apology is not how we apologize, right? That person, if they want to apologize, if they feel like they've done something wrong, they'll apologize to you. If not, maybe that's not a person you want to be around. But the other side of this coin is like, well, we'll start to avoid people that trigger us all the time, right? And so we'll stick ourselves in these silos of agreeability. And that's not diversity. I mean, the one thing, like, we have plenty of problems in the United States of America, but the one thing I think is beautiful about this country is it is a country of immigrants. It is a country of cultural diversity, and it's developed into that, right? And so I think that although we have racism, bigotry, and all these other things here, the beautiful thing about this country is there are people from every corner of the planet that are Americans, right? And you can find that. And that's a beautiful thing. And I think that diversity helps us grow, it helps us become better, right? Ultimately, like these borders we made up. And so I think when we try to homogenize the way we think and the way we feel and just like stick ourselves in these pools of like everyone's just like me and thinks the same way, it's really dangerous, right? It creates more division, and you don't have to agree with someone to be friends with them, to see their kindness, to see their beauty. There's a lot of people I disagree with on different things, but how will we ever grow if we can't communicate? And so that word trigger, it's really been used now as sort of a wall instead of a bridge, which I always think of it this way, like, and I view this the same thing with religion, with spirituality, with freaking astrology, whatever things we get obsessed with. Is it opening you to growth, or is it closing and shielding you from connection, right? And be really honest about that. When you really think about the things you're obsessed with, what is it doing for you in your life, your behaviors? What is it doing? Is it closing you off from growth and connection, or is it opening you to it, right? If it's truly opening you and not closing your mind, seems like a healthy practice for you, right? For instance, if we just go on a tangent here, but I just want to bring up astrology. Like some people will use astrology to be like, oh, I'm a this, that is my sun, moon, rising sign, and I see how like this is part of my shadow. I'm trying to be better. Other people, they'll use it to make excuses, or they'll be so stuck on it where they're like, well, you're a this, so like this is why. I'm like, this is the same thing with like dogma. It's just like you're so stuck on it because you want something so bad to believe in because you're so scared of just understanding that we all have shitty parts of ourselves and good parts. And it's like the Native American parable, like which one are you going to feed today? You have a choice, right? It doesn't matter if you're a Scorpio or a Leo or a whatever.
Follow-up question for you, kind of in the same vein, is when it comes to like mental health and working on ourselves,
Mm.
do you think that people tend to find the stuff online that like feeds into what they already believe? So like the memes and um, the reels that kind of align with what they're already feeling to validate? what they're feeling versus like, do you think it's doing us a disservice, all this mental health stuff on online, because people can kind of pick and choose what they want to take in?
Okay. Yes. Great question. So the first part is the answer is yes, we do stick ourselves in silos, but it also is the responsibility of the company. So if you think about Instagram and Facebook, they operate on algorithms. So they see how much attention you give something, right? If you're emotionally triggered or emotionally engaged, they're picking up how many seconds your eyes stare at one post, right? How many times you like something, if you leave a comment. All this data is being collected from you, right? This is my problem with the internet in general, and especially now with AI, it's becoming even more refined, right? So it's the currency of attention, right? And so they have scientists and brilliant programmers literally figuring out how to manipulate and capture your attention. And unless you use your consciousness, unless you're thinking logically, right? Unless you're being aware, you're just a monkey basically, and your commodity is attention span, right? That's how they're making money. And so if you like a certain post, well, Instagram or Facebook's gonna be like, let's put more in front of this person, let's put more. And so by design, you're being ushered that way, right? But also you have a choice. So you're going to keep seeking those too, right? It's a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? And so you have to consciously look for things from a different perspective. You have to consciously look for things from the other side, right? Maybe you're an atheist. Maybe go talk to some people that are religious that can have conversations and see how they feel. Maybe understand why, right? Maybe it's just not blind faith. Maybe it actually is connection and community. Maybe there's beauty in that. Maybe you're a very religious person. Maybe you want to go talk to an atheist to see why they experienced that. Maybe there was a lot of religious shame they grew up with. Maybe they felt very oppressed. Maybe, they weren't accepted for who they love. Maybe there's a lot of different perspectives, right? And that's how we grow closer together. So I think if there's one thing that I really like to share, it's just you have to build that self-awareness. You have to continuously question why you think, feel, and choose, to use Dr. Caroline Leaf's words. Like, that's really it. No one's going to do it for you. And if you don't do it for yourself, the internet it'll tell you how to think, and it'll keep sticking you in a silo, right? And it's not an excuse. Like, I think a lot of people believe, like, they blame the government or they blame Facebook or whatever. It's like, dude, these things are going to exist. We created them, right? They're human designed. And so we're not subservient to them. You can have a choice. You can have a discourse, right? I think a lot of people, they would rather just focus on anger. Well, I'm angry this is happening. I'm like, anger, it's good as a motivator, but it's not going to get you anywhere, right? You need to have understanding and compassion, then move forward with grace and courage and honor. Not easy. I mean, it's easy for me to sit here and say that. Like, I mean, I get angry at things all the time, right? As a counselor, it's like I'm not this Buddhistic person with my hands, in this savasana pose, just floating through life. Like, I get angry, I say hurtful things, and I'm a human being. But I think ultimately, as a man, I've grown to be able to apologize for those things, own them, and then make them less occurrent, right? Not only because of the work I've done, but because of the people I surround myself with. That's another huge component of really being in actual therapy, is focusing on your community. If you're surrounding yourself with people that are not good human beings for you to be around, if you don't, I always say it this way: if you whether you want kids or not, if you're around people that you wouldn't want your child to be like, probably don't keep it up. you know I seek people that I want to be around, that I would want my grown daughter, my grown son to be like, whether I have kids or not. And in that psyche, it kind of like separates you from being emotionally attached to the person, and be like, wait a minute, this person keeps doing this, like, and they never show up for me, they're never there. And a lot of
Right.
times your relationships are either feeding your soul or killing it.
So you mentioned the word, um, I guess, shame a few times. And I'm just curious, what role do you think being kind to yourself, grace for yourself, and really self forgiveness plays in the healing journey? Because, in my own healing journey, I feel like those are the points that are really pivotal, is when I have to kind of forgive myself for an action or maybe something I deem like was a waste of time or that I shouldn't have done. So I'm just curious your thoughts around how important forgiveness and grace are to yourself in the healing process.
Well, the quick answer is extremely important. The harder reality of it is that it's very difficult, especially if you're a very self-critical person like I am. Um, there is not a single person on this planet that I'm harder on than myself, and that propelled me to greatness in a lot of avenues in my life, whether it be a pro athlete or being good in academics, or I don't know, just being able to put your head down and get through stuff. But it's a double-edged sword. It's also it made me incredibly self-critical. It's made me very critical of people closest to me, people I love, right? Which can drive them away, which can push them away. And I think as you grow into awareness, you're really honest with yourself. until you can find some way to rectify, whether you've made huge mistakes, hurt others, right? It's really, you can't really get to a point of self forgiveness until you really own everything you've done, right? And that's really hard for a lot of people. I mean, a lot of us have done hurtful things. We've lied, we've cheated, we've done something, or we've said something very hurtful to someone, whether you're a kid or you're older or whatever. And you know doesn't matter what scale it is, right? Whether it's something egregious or something minor in your mind, the psyche will always hold it there, right? It holds you captive to what you've done in your past. And so you're in this little jail cell. And then if you think about these little people on the outside jail cell with these like spears, and they're just like poke at you every time you do something good, it's just like, yeah, but you're still this kind of person, don't forget, we're here. And that is just your ego just completely eating you away, right? And I think you need a little bit of that in life, because if you have this grandiose view of yourself the whole time, that's literally what narcissism is. It's like, no mistakes, so it keeps you humble and keeps you in humility. But you have to use your conscience to know that, wait a minute, like this, there's a certain amount that's healthy of this, and a certain amount that when I tip this scale, it becomes this like self-deprecating, self-sabotaging pattern. And I can't tell anyone where that balance is for every individual. We have to find it through the process of therapy, or they find it through the process of living life. But there is a balance there. And when you find it, you have to stay in it. It's not like you get there and you just like sitting on the ledge. It's like, it's a conscious effort to keep that ego at bay, because again, the ego, or whatever, the psyche, whatever you want to refer it to, it's not a bad thing, right? It serves a huge purpose in how we exist as human beings. But if we feed it too much, then all of a sudden we start to be disconnected with our soul, or what I would say spirit. And the whole thing I think about spirit is just, it connects us souls together. So the ability for me to fall in love with you, for you to fall in love with me, in my mind is spirit. It's God, whatever you want to call it, right? It's something that's not tangible. We can't really study it with science. We can study how the brain responds to it, but not really like the energy, right? That's passed through. And I think that when we're so stuck in the ego and we're so self-judgmental, we can't be sitting in soul. And it's about balancing those two. So to get back to your point is like, we have to be self-critical, but also not to the point where we're completely destroying the self, right? Like get to a point where there's a balance where you're like, yes, I've done these things, these were mistakes, now what am I going to do about it? I can still love myself even though I did those in the moment. I'm not a bad person, I can choose to be better, right? How do I be better? I have to change my behaviors now. And that might also include not being around people that sort of influence those behaviors in the first place too, right? Again, it's not just about you, it's about your community.
Absolutely, your tribe.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a great segue to a topic I know many people want to hear about, relationships.
Yeah.
What have you found in your work just with dealing with people? What is kind of the important hurdle or issue that somebody needs to overcome or work on in order to have a successful relationship, with people in their life, maybe specifically romantic? I don't know if that's different or not.
Mhm.
But is there something that you see that people specifically work on, and then it's kind of like that aha moment
Yeah.
where things click for them in their relationships?
Yeah. It's a hard question to be specific about because it's very broad, as you know, right? And so let's just focus on romantic relationships, because if we talk about parent and child, that's a whole different way. But I think that's equally important because that's where everything starts. Everything starts from childhood, right? But if we focus on adult romance or even adolescent romance, like I think the thing, if you were to say what's the one thing people should really work on, I think it's the practice of being a good student and a good teacher. I think those parts were taught to me through Alain de Botton, who's a philosopher who started the School of Life in London, who I'm a big fan of. And really, there's a lot that goes into that, from looking at your childhood trauma to building self-knowledge to looking at your family dynamic and how you relate to that, all this stuff, right? But if we're just looking at broader picture, practice being a better student and being a good teacher. And in those things, you find being better at communicating, being better at feeling your feelings, understanding your feelings, not dumping your feelings on someone, not blaming how you're treating someone on, your where you are in your cycle, or what you did, at work that day, or how someone's shitting on you, whether you're a man or a woman, right? Really being present with yourself, and what a lot of Buddhists or people that are into meditation calls noting, right? It's like, oh, I've just had an angry feeling. Okay, why did I just feel angry, right? Is it really because of what they said, or is it because of how whatever my past is, influencing how I'm feeling? And in that, you become a good student. You're learning about yourself. That's where self knowledge self-awareness comes from. It's self-wisdom. That's how it's built. Understanding yourself, how you think, and then therefore you can change how you behave, right? If you don't know how you're thinking and why, you're not going to be able to change how you're behaving, because the thought precedes the behavior usually, unless you're just doing stuff without thinking. And then, well, that's a whole nother thing we got to get into, right? And then if you can be a good teacher, well, then you teach someone else that too. Like these are things that have triggered me in the past. And when we become with a partner, then we can work together to not trigger each other. We're always going to trigger each other, but trigger each other less, right? And if that partner meets us where we are, that's called compatibility. And so I always tell people, you're looking for romantic relationships. Of course, you have physical attraction, emotional compatibility, intellectual compatibility, spiritual compatibility, if you want kids or not, all these things, right? You have to be on the same level in the areas that are important to you, right? And so if you ask me when I was 22, I was like, I want someone who's like 5'10" or taller, beautiful, super athletic, incredibly intelligent, like independent, all these things. And now emotional awareness and emotional like like what would I say, emotional intelligence is way on the very top. I mean, I'm not with a deep person, it doesn't matter how sexy you are, how great the sex is. If you're freaking the most awesome athlete in the world, we can't even get in the doorway. I need that. I need the other things too, but like to a less degree. And then there's preferences and deal breakers in that too, right? So I know I went on this whole thing, but you asked me a plain question, which is like, what would I recommend? Get better at being a better student and a better teacher. And that includes student and teacher of yourself and of another too.
I think that's really great, because I think I'm going to tie this to something else that I feel all the time. There is a societal pressure to on single people specifically as you get older to be in relationships. And for me personally, I feel like, sometimes anything you've done in your life is like overlooked if you're not in a relationship. Again, I don't really know why other people are more concerned about people being in relationships than maybe that person is. But I think, to your point, because of that, people tend to kind of overlook the work they have to do just to like be in a relationship, because it's some sort of like social marker. And I wonder if you've kind of noticed that, or what your thoughts are on that, where people are skipping that self work and kind of the basis you need for
Mm.
healthy relationships, because there's so much pressure to like be in one and fit into your communities that way.
Yes. Okay. So I think the thing with that is like, we first of all, we are a relational creature, right? If you look at cats, sorry, cat people, but like cats aren't a pack animal. They really aren't. Like what most cats, and I'm not talking about lions or the people go like, what about lions and tigers? Okay, we're thinking about the house cat. Like the house cat or a bobcat, it can exist on its own, right? When it's one or two, it goes off. It's a predator, survives, right? That's not what humans are. Humans are a social tribe animal. We would not be alive if it wasn't for one another. In fact, if you look at like the history of humanity and geology, like there are other things that were quite closely related to us that were more solo hunters, right? Even Neanderthals, and we sort of outlasted them because we had each other. Holy shit, right? And we've started wars because we have each other too, but we've also fallen in love and built society and created all these other things, and so we all want relationships, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? Now, if we want it for someone else, it's just none of our business. Of course, I can wish relationships. I wish love on everybody, but like if someone doesn't want to be a relationship, that's fine. I will say that like I think the greatest thing we could do here is the relationship, right? Whether it's a relationship with children, if you want to have kids, if not, it's okay too. There's nothing wrong with that. But I think we all want to be loved. I don't think there's a single human being that isn't being influenced by their trauma or something that's been done to them. That if at the deep down in that little child that wants to be loved, right? And a lot of people feel like they're unlovable. Or a lot of people will say, well, just accept me for who I am. I'm like, well, what if you have all these shitty parts? It's not a real good deal, like you need to work on those things. And so I have, it's like a two thing approach. I think we should all really want healthy relationships. We should strive to have them. You can't have a healthy relationship until you have a healthy one with yourself, right? And as my friend Jillian Trekkie says, it doesn't mean you have to be perfect before you get in a relationship. You just have to have a base level awareness of like, where are the shitty parts of yourself that show up when it really matters? Like I'm a different person if I'm like walking in the street shaking hands with strangers versus like if you're dating or if you're with me for 2 years, like I might have a shorter fuse because like, right? And so we have to figure that out. Why do I have a shorter fuse? Well, I need to communicate up front what my wants and needs are, right? I have to work with my partner so that we don't build resentment, so that we don't build these things, And so to get back to your question, why do people want relationships and we have this social stigma? Yes, we do. I think it comes from a place of love. I don't think it's malintent for most part. I mean, I think there's some like religions out there that are like, you must be married to have worth. And like, I don't think that's the case, right? Marriage is an institution, relationships are not. Relationships are actual what we're here for, right? Whether you get married or not, it doesn't change your love, right? It might make it more valuable in your head, but really like in your heart, it doesn't change anything. If you're a shitty partner before you get married, you're going to be a shitty partner after. If you had a good relationship before you get married, you're going to have a good relationship after. You keep on that track, right? So I don't ever have a problem with people that like want, someone to be in a relationship, but it is stigmatized to be single, right? I think it's changing. I think now, like single on purpose, for instance, John Kim, Jillian talks about this a lot. Um, Singlehood is an important thing for all of us to go through. You get into these patterns of jumping from relationship to relationship. I was in a relationship when I was 18 to 20, and then 21 to 24, and then 25 to 28. I'm like, okay, so who are you? When did you get to know yourself, right? When did you spend some alone time? You can't really get to know yourself when you're just focused on someone else. So I think there's always a period of alone time we should all have. And I don't mean like complete solitude. I mean, go out and make connections, but like, don't just consciously date. Like, spend some alone time, get to know yourself, get to know what you like, what you love, what lights you up. But also know that like you can't just stay stuck in that. And yes, going on online dating and going on dates is nerve-wracking. Yes, you open yourself up to risk of being hurt, of being lied to, of being all these things too. But guess what? The other option is just to be alone and stick yourself in a box for the rest of the world and hide from pain. And if you're hiding from pain, you're also hiding from love.
What's your advice to people along that same vein who are just kind of, they're so, for the lack of a better word, negative about dating? They're like, oh, it's just the same thing over and over again. There's nobody out there. We all have friends like that.
Yep.
What's kind of your advice to those people? I mean, obviously, it's the more positive your mindset, the more you're going to kind of attract what you're looking for. But I don't know if you have any specifics.
So I've been one of those people, and I think I'm one of those people depending on the day. You know, but I
Fair
also
enough.
but it's because I'm a human. Again, I'm very honest, right? It's like, but then I come back to the reality of like, okay, if I'm just going to be self-critical and that everybody sucks and like these prompts, like, oh my God, people don't write any deep things, and they're like, well, like for instance, I was just talking to a friend the other day, and I was like, what I see on dating apps a lot is like, a girl will say like, oh, like if you don't love pineapple on pizza, like we can't match. Or they'll be like, if you voted left, swipe right, or these things. I'm like, yo, what is like, where is your depth? Like, what are you, who are you, like what do you value, what have you been and what are you looking for and what are you offering, these deeper things. But just there's a lot of shallow folks out there because we're not really encouraged to really be deep, right? They come from their own storylines, and I have no judgment in that, but it can be very discouraging for someone that's looking for more, right? And so what do I tell people? You got to keep trying and take breaks, right? It's like anything, like it's like any muscle. You go to the gym, you got to have to have rest periods too, So if you're feeling overwhelmed and you're not feeling good, maybe take a couple weeks off and reset, like do some things for yourself. But I also understand really wanting to meet somebody. And so sometimes you can feel really negative if you got on some dates, you had some relationships that didn't work out. Maybe you put in 2 to 3 to 5 years, maybe you were married for 17, it didn't work out, but don't give up. There are 8 billion people on this planet. I mean, that is a shit ton of human beings, probably a little bit too many human beings, if you ask the other animals. And I think that because of that, there's a lot of people out there. So like mathematically, and I know a lot of us aren't good at math, but it's pretty easy to count to 8 billion if you start some point, right? It's like, all right, we're going up and I'm one, and there's, all these other. So there's probably one person out there, and probably no, there's probably tons of people, right? Tons of people. And so you just got to keep connecting. And here's the thing, don't put so much pressure on someone being the perfect match. That just doesn't exist, right? A lot of times we're just looking to date ourselves and we are not really honest because we have this self-inflated thing of like, I want someone to be this, 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 and this, that. I'm like, oh, are you those things? Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, okay, tell me. And then when they start telling me, I'm like, well, wait a minute. There's some areas in there you probably get better at, right? Yes. Okay. And I don't mean date a project, but I mean understand that if someone is compatible, and again, those things that I brought up, and that's good for you, you're starting from somewhere, right? You want to start from the similar foundation and you're building the house together, right? You don't fall in love, you build it, right? Someone's like, oh, I'm falling in love. I'm like, that's just, you just feel like someone's sexy, you're falling in charisma with their story. And that's wonderful. It's part of it. It's like that feeling you get when that when you drop is, oh man, this person could be it, right? And then all of a sudden we start playing all these stories in our heads, like, oh, we'll get married in 2 years and we'll have kids and we'll have a couple of dogs and we'll have this family and all these things. We do it in our heads, right? It's okay. It's part of the romance. It's beautiful, but that isn't actually love, right? Love is what you build when that stuff starts to happen, when shit hits the fan, right? When things go wrong, that's where love is built, over and over and over again every single day. And it doesn't mean one day you might not fail, one day you might not do it worse than others, but it's the effort that you put in that's loving somebody. Right. And so I think a lot of people become negative because they've never found that, or they had it and they lost it, maybe because of what they did, maybe because of what someone else did, maybe a combination of both. And so they become jaded. Right. And I understand that. Like, I totally understand that. I mean, there's so much about it that is painful, but at the end of the day, if you're really honest with yourself, you are here to love, you're here to be loved, and you have to keep trying. Because if you don't keep trying, you're just giving up and accepting the predicament. And then what are you doing? You're not living, you're just waiting to die. Even if you have a shit ton of money, you're like, I'm living this great life and I'm traveling all over, right? And I'm spending solo, or I'm an independent woman or independent man. I'm just, all I need is me. Not really, guys. Really, if you're really honest about it, like, it's good that you have that, right? But you really do need to be loved too, just like you need to give your love. And when you fully admit that, it's okay to say you need somebody. Like, it's okay. Now, I'm not saying be codependent, but it's okay to need love. Like, we all need it.
I agree with you. I think as human beings, we need connection. Do you think when you hear like the concept of partnership versus relationship, do you think that's where the whole thing about depth and working, love is something you work at comes in? Or how do you perceive this whole school of thought around like a partnership versus a relationship, and which one's, I guess,
Yeah.
deeper?
Yeah. I don't know if there's one that's deeper. It's just semantics, but I will say, in my mind, a relationship you have with everything, yourself, with friends, with family, with your dog. A partnership is much more intimate, right? Like this person's going to know a lot more about you. You're probably going to wake up in the same bed as them every day, you know? And so I think of like you're partnering through life together versus life separately. It doesn't mean you don't have your own interests and things where you have alone time and you do your thing with your own friends. You're not fully enmeshed, because that's probably not great. But a partnership is like you're on the same team. Whereas a relationship, you don't necessarily have to be on the same team, but you're having a relationship with my friend, right? My friend's his best friend, this friend, like, I'm there for them. But that's never going to emulate what it's like to really spend a lot of time with someone, right? You spend a lot of time with someone, you start to become more like them, or they become more like you, right? And you also start to run into these big speed bumps, these obstacles, that can be quite gruesome in some ways, right? Someone, like, I fell in love with someone, and all of a sudden, like, I'm noticing this that, like, I didn't see before, and that's why it's really important to date and date consciously, and to show who you are, right? And to work on yourself too, because just because someone made some mistakes in the past doesn't mean they'll make it again, right? Um, and so I think that's the difference. What I feel like with partnership and relationship, but really, in my mind, it's all semantics. Like you want to be a better friend, you should be a better partner, you should be better to yourself. Like, all those things require the same concerted effort and the same idea of, like, I have shit to work on, and I'm going to continue to work on it every day.
That reminds me, what to you is a good friend? What do you think are like the top qualities of a good friend? I think we all think we're a good friend,
Yep.
but sometimes we're not, right? Sometimes we assume, Nico doesn't need me to like pat him on the back. He's good.
Yep.
Or whatever it might be. What's your thought on just what's a good friend? And do we all show up like that consistently?
Yeah, so I think, okay, so I'm going to say what from my perspective is a good friend, but it is subjective, right? We all need different things and different levels, and that's why we connect with different friends. Like, I will do anything to show up for people I love, if someone needs me and I'm on the opposite side of the world, I will figure out a way to fly to them and help them. That's just the kind of man I am. That's the kind of human being I am. Those are the kind of human beings I want to surround myself with, right? Now, that requirement will be quite high for some people, and those people probably won't be my closest friends. I could be acquaintances, and be nice to someone, but I won't connect with them on a deep level because they don't have that commitment to service. And so, for me, from my perspective, what constitutes a good friend is the ability to selflessly sacrifice and show up for somebody, not at the point of self-sacrifice, meaning you, like, completely, because you matter, obviously, but, like, being a good friend is consistently sort of being invested in their health, their well-being, their life, and their goals, and showing up for them. And also, hopefully, that person does that for you, but you're not doing those actions on the requirement of getting it back, right? It's not this transaction. So if you never get it back, then you probably know this person's probably not a great friend for you, and then you have to have some self-respect and look for friendship elsewhere. But mostly, those are the things I hold myself to with my friendships. Like, each one of my close friends, like, they know they can count on me. If I don't, regardless if I don't have money to give them, or I will always give them my time. And I will show up for them. And so if they need advice or they need me, I don't care how tired I am, like, I will show up because I might need that at some point too. And I'm not even doing it for, like, the preemptive notion that I might need it. I'm doing it because I love them. I'm doing it because I care about them, right? I care about like who they are as a person. I care about their relationship with their spouse. I care about their relationship with their kids. I don't have any relationship, like for instance, like I'm not in their romantic relationship, but I know that because I love them, I therefore love their partner and I love everything they love. And I want them to be healthy in that. And sometimes that's also just being brutally honest about what's going on too. I'm not the kind of friend that just agrees with my friend to make them feel better all the time, right? I hold them accountable and I expect the same from them, because a lot of times people pick, again, talking about silos, talking about putting yourself in this victimhood is like your friend will be like, oh, babe, leave them. You deserve better. I'm like, well, what if you're just acting horribly? What if you're not taking their perspective and seeing like how they might be feeling so horrendous from what you're doing, or you're not acknowledging their feelings, right? I try to be that friend. I try to give as much unbiased advice as possible, and if I agree, I'll say so. If I think that my friend is doing something wrong or acting in their shadow, I'll say that too. And I'll say, hey, out of all the love in the world, I think that this is what's going on. And again, I don't have any stake in, I don't have any skin in the game. Like the relationship working out or something working out, my friends, it doesn't directly affect me, but because I love them, I just want to give as, much of that as possible. And I think that's what constitutes a good friend. And it doesn't mean you always get it right, but I think it's easier to see things when you're not emotionally invested in them. And I think that's why good friends can really come in handy when they're trying to keep you in check, when you're dating, when you're married, when you're raising kids. Because they say, hey, you know what? We've had this conversation 10 years ago and you were doing the same shit then. You know, it's probably
Yeah.
not the other person.
And I think calling out your friends in a healthy way is an underrated skill.
Sure.
And it is really, it's beneficial for any friendship. And those are the people you want around you, not just the people telling you, rah, 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 everything you're doing is right. But, friendships ebb and flow through life, which kind of brings me to, I know something you talk a lot about, which is grief and loss.
Mm.
And there's, this kind of school of thought going around that we're all going through some sort of loss at any given time, whether it's, someone who's passed away, whether it's a relationship loss, whether it's just like an experience that you're no longer a part of. So you feel like you've lost that part of yourself. Do you feel like a lot of the people that you see are kind of stuck in the cycle of grief? And what is it about people that allows them to kind of move forward? Like what type of work do they need to do? Probably depending on the type of grief, but what do people need to do to kind of take a grief or a loss experience
Yeah.
and catapult that into like positive change, kind of probably like what you did after your accident?
Okay. So this, I'm really glad you framed it this way. I don't think the grieving ever stops. Uh,
Mm,
I think that when you start to heal from grief, you get closer to accepting it, but it doesn't mean it goes away. For instance, if I paint this picture, like if a mother loses her son, right? I'll talk about my friend Chris Moon, who was in the Army, and when he was 21 years old, I grew up playing baseball with him. His mom, Marcia, it's been, so he passed away in 2011. So that was like 13 years ago now. I think it was in June. And I know his mom's not done grieving. It's her son, right? She obviously, that boy came out of her. She took him to baseball practice. She saw him get a scholarship to the highest, like the number one ranked baseball school in the U.S., and then decide to leave that school and join the Army and become a sniper, and then he vanished, right? He died. And so I bring this up because this is a very like gut wrenching story, right? But grief is processed in the same way. Like I'll never not miss my grandfather. I'll never not want to hear his voice again. I'll never not want to ask him questions about love and life because he passed away when I was 22 and I didn't fall in love yet, I have a lot of questions for him. I won't stop grieving. But as time goes by, you start to appreciate like what the time you had, no matter how short. You even think about people losing their child, unborn child, or maybe, they lost, right, those kind of things. And so grief isn't there to overcome. It's there to make peace with, right? Grief is not a mountain you will ever summit. And if you're trying to, you're fighting against it, right? Grief is something you have to learn how to live with, right? And it's going to suck for a while, right? No one's going to, if someone's trying to sell you a book or a flashcard or a course on how to get over grief in X amount of time, don't waste your money. Grief is not time dependent. It doesn't play by our rules, right? Grief is a universal thing. So therefore it can't exist just in one little time blip, right? Grief is going to continue, right? Just like energy is going to continue. And so even if you stop living, that experience is still here somewhere, right? It's going to live on through someone else or through something else. And so rather than start to focus on how can I get over this grief and just feel better immediately, I can take a pill, I'll go work out, I'll run myself into the ground, I'll focus on work. Understand that it's not going to go anywhere. And as soon as you make peace with that, you cry, you feel it, you go through it, you experience the grief, right? Don't let it swallow you. You still have to try to find joy. And it takes a lot of courage to still try to find joy, still try to smile. But if you can get to that point, doing a good job. And you will get to that point. And then again, going back to community, people that help you get there, right? You can't do it alone. You're not supposed to grieve alone. It's not how it works. We don't ever experience trauma in a silo. Therefore, we can't heal in a silo. Therefore, you can't heal outside of a relationship fully. You have to be in one, right? And people are scared about that. And so with grieving, you can't just stick yourself in a room and read a bunch of books and meditate and grieve. It's just not how it works. Other people are hurting too. One of the best ways to grieve, go around other people that are also hurting similar experiences like you. One of the coolest things about, for instance, going to the armed forces thing, it's like, I know Marsha, she went to a lot of support groups with other moms and dads that have lost their kids. And that's a very specific thing, right? Whether you agree with military is doing or whatever, all that whole thing, it's not what we're even here to discuss. It's really just about the process of grieving, being in a community that is also experiencing that. It's one of the main things why AA works for people, right? You're going to other people that have addictions or in the same room, and they really want to be out of them. And so being around that helps you stay focused, helps you move forward, helps you go through that. Because that is a process of grieving. You're grieving your old self, all the things you did, how you treated your body, right? The addiction that you were obsessed with, and that's why a lot of times believing in something else and practicing a spirituality helps you grieve too. I know, I went to Catholic school, was raised Catholic my whole life. And then I had a long part that I was agnostic and atheist because I went to science school and studied a bunch of stuff. And I was like, asked these questions. I was like, yeah, I don't really agree with this religion anymore. There's a lot of oppression in it. There's a lot of judgment. Why can't two men love each other? Why can't two women love each other? And there's, I'm just, you should love who the hell you want to love. Why should God care about that? And then in my mind, I reconnected with it probably about a year ago because I was so lonely and so absent that like I still was grieving and I wanted to congregate with people and like share it, just be in a room and like focus on something else other than myself, and that's, I think that's a lot of what we're missing too. And you don't have to go to a church for that. You can find community, but like, again, we're a social animal. We are built to congregate, right? And not just to focus on me, but to focus on go volunteer at a soup kitchen if you're grieving, go make some food and hand it out to homeless people and come back and tell me you don't feel better, right? I mean, if you just sit and mope around, and there's a period of that, obviously. I mean, you're really truly grieving when you've experienced massive loss. Obviously, you don't want to get out of bed, obviously. But if you can do it as much as you can, keep fighting, Um, and I think that's how we grieve. There's no playbook to it. We all grieve differently, but at the end of the day, it's where your focus is. If my focus is on the top of the mountain, I'm not grieving. I have to be where I'm at. I have to be where I'm at.
I really appreciate your take on that and just kind of tying it all back to like our need for connection and community, not just in a romantic way, but just in all aspects of our life. As we've been talking, I'm just curious, is there a question, because I'm sure when people find out you're a counselor, I'm sure you get your brain gets picked a lot about every and anything. Is there something that you get asked about the most, like when you meet people?
I don't think anyone's ever asked me that before. I get asked a lot about grief. I think particularly because the episode I had with Jillian Turecki on her show was focused on grief, and a lot of people came to know some of the stuff I work on. So I do get a lot of people come to me grieving, whether that's athletes that are going through some sort of thing that I went through, or they have a big injury, or maybe they got diagnosed with a disease. I get a lot of folks that are going through a separation or are on the midst of a separation, or perhaps their spouse just got sick or they just lost their spouse. So I don't know if it's a particular question, but definitely I get a lot of people grieving, and that would make sense because a lot of times we don't look for help until we're at rock bottom and we need it. I wish people came earlier because you can start to think about this, beforehand. It doesn't make it any less hard. It just makes it a little bit more of an ease into the grief. A lot of times grief happens like that, right? Something happens, trauma, acute injury, something, and then grief, right? But you can also, and sometimes it's unavoidable, right? Car accidents, there's something happens, right? But like a lot of times, it's going to happen, and so you can preemptively start to grieve ahead of time or start to understand grief, read books on grief, read books on death. I think one thing that people talk a lot about in session with me, and I'm particularly obsessed with death because I think it's the biggest gift you're ever going to be given. And I know it sounds backwards, but like our ability to die gives meaning to everything else in our lives, right? And we're obsessed now with looking younger and like not dying and living to 130 or whatever. And I'm like, dude, I don't know if I want to live that long. I know that like I still have a lot to do and I would love to do it. If I don't get the opportunity and my life is taken at some point, at some other time, then so be it. And I will welcome death at some point, It doesn't mean there won't be things that I want to do, or things that I wish I could have done. But if you're living sort of with the idea of like you just keep on living, oh, like just to extend your life, well, then not really focused on like the present. And I think we're in a society that's really obsessed with like how long can I push this story? And it's like, well, what are you doing with it? How are you giving back? How are you ensuring that the young people that come after you are going to have the same opportunities or have more or, you know, have wisdom? I mean, one of the things, honestly, like I try to focus on, I know I'm getting on a tangent here, is like elder wisdom. Like I really want to become an elder that can pass on wisdom, not from again being higher up from somebody, but from inside being like, I was in your shoes too, and I also felt depressed and alone and made mistakes in this, and it's okay. Like it doesn't mean you're a bad person. You can become better. How do we get here? So I don't know if there's a particular question that's come up a lot. I mean, a lot of people come to me going through heartbreak, and that's a given. Half of the time, I think when you ask people why they went to therapy for the first time, it's because they went through a breakup or a divorce or they lost or they grieved something. I think grief brings you into therapy a lot. So that's a big common theme, but there's not a specific question. I don't think people come from so many different walks of life and so many different experiences, and I'm consistently both surprised and impressed from human beings and the human condition and the fact that people have the courage to still keep trying.
I feel like you read my mind because I was just going to say I love sitting with elderly people because it's that going back to what you said about death, they're closer to it. So their perspective on it is different versus when you're younger. Like my dad, he's 80, and it's like no matter what's going on, he's always like, life is beautiful. That's his thing that he texts to me. And it just puts things in perspective. Like if I'm having a moment about something and you go, wow, this 80-year-old man who maybe didn't live the life he wanted to or has had a lot of loss or whatever it is, he has the ability to look and say life is beautiful. And so
Yeah.
I love that and I relate to that.
It's a good dad. Not everyone has that kind of dad. It's a good dad. I'm sure you have your own experience with him too, right? But like that's really good that he does that because um a lot of people, they will run into a situation where their parents, like they so want them to say those words or to say like I love you, or or be that like soften in that wisdom, and a lot of parents, elderly parents, are still fighting that. They won't apologize, they won't own their shit, they won't see that they like death should keep us honest, like it's keeping your dad honest, right? He knows he doesn't have much time here, and so he wants to leave it with grace, with love, right? I want to do that too. I want to start earlier. I don't want to wait till I'm 80. But a lot of people never get to that point. They'll die like curmudgeonly and like angry and not having a relationship with their kids or not being. It's like, yo, stop it now. You could leave tomorrow. Stop messing around. Stop expecting someone to apologize to you. Reach out, connect. And again, can't pick our family, and some people have family members that they just can't connect with because it hurts, and I understand that, right? But at the end of the day, like if you love somebody, like reach out and tell them, and like don't expect anything else. Just like tell them you care, right? Show up for them in a way you can, because otherwise you're gonna get old and you're gonna wish you showed up a little bit differently. And I think one of the biggest things that I already have regrets in life. I'm like, I wish I would have done this differently. I wish I would have, done it. And now I'm just like, I still have life. Like, do it now. Stop making excuses. Stop making excuses. Do it now, because I'm aging. I'm dying right now. You and I are both dying. You know. And so that's what I tell myself all the time. It's like, no more excuses. I don't care if my arm hurts or I'm in pain all the time. Like, stop making excuses. Get after it. Start loving people. Start getting after things you want to do. And start making the world a better place. And stop. You don't need a lot of money to do that.
The anticipation of having a conversation or apologizing is like sometimes way worse than just
Fear.
having the conversation. Yeah, fear for
Yeah.
sure.
Dude, it's crazy. I just had this conversation. Like, I've been really wanting to go to church for a while now. And I haven't been in church probably since 2019. Even before that, probably hadn't been since my grandfather passed away in 2012. And I used to go to church all the time when I was Catholic, as a kid. And there's this really cool church in Flagstaff where I live, called the Commons, run by this guy named Charlie McCauley. And he's actually going to come on my show. He's going to be the first like actual like pastor or preacher that's coming on the show. And he's like super open, like just this dude's got a great mind on him. The way he's relating Christianity is completely different, very, very much accepting and embracing of other religions. And there's not like a hierarchy. It's like we all are trying to just be better, right? When you really truly use it for how it's supposed to be. And the reason I've been wanting to go to that is because it's just like, it's nice to be in like that environment of feeling like people care about you you're sort of like, coming together to sort of practice this. And there's a lot of wisdom in that too. I pushed that away for a long time because there's a lot of oppression and a lot of dogma too, but you don't have to choose that way of, spirituality. You can certainly believe in a religion and not have to like throw it at everyone else. Like it's like the only thing. It doesn't like mean you're in blasphemy. It just means like it's for you, right? It's to make you a better person. It's to help you connect with others. It's not about this person has to believe what I believe for me to love them. No.
In the spirit of, this season of the Humanity podcast being about being kind to yourself, how do you show kindness to yourself, specifically on the days that are tougher?
That's hard. I just want to be forthcoming. I don't think I'm very good at this, you know. I think I'm trying to get better. Uh, but what I would tell myself from a place of knowing and not doing, those are two different things, right? Like do as I say, not as I do kind of thing, right? Um, I think it's just really important to tell yourself like you can forgive yourself and say, what you did or what you did or what you said, excuse me, is does not define who you are. But if you keep doing it over and over again the same way, that defines your character. And so if you get to a point where your character is really ingrained in this behavior or these behaviors that you're doing, the only way to practice self-kindness is to start to change the behaviors. Like you can accept them, but if you don't change them, you're still going to start to hate yourself, right? Because you're doing the same shit, So it's like, I get it. Self-hatred is there. I mean, it's going to be there, right? You hate yourself because you're doing things that aren't aligning with your soul, right? Whether it's you're in a relationship that's not for you, or whether you're treating your partner like shit, or whether you're getting angry and screaming, or shutting down and hiding emotionally, or being mean to your kids, or not showing up for them, or maybe showing up for them too much, not letting them fall and fly on their own wings, proliferate a bunch of different ways. But like the only way to really be kind to yourself is to start to change those patterns to where you can really be proud of yourself and proud of your honor and stuff like that. And I think that's particularly hard in a culture that is very much focused on the selfie. It's like, well, you see that I have a great family, you see that I'm really a good person, so I must be a really good person. All these people like and comment, and I'm like, that's not reality, right? Reality is when there's no camera looking at you, like, how are you behaving, who are you doing? And you know it's something I've struggled with for sure. Still struggle with it. How do I practice self-kindness? um, I just try to have a conversation with myself all the time, like, hey, you know if you keep behaving this way, it's not who you want to be. It's not who you are. You have to change it. And how do you get to that change? Is it the person you're around? Is that person pushing you continuously to behave this way? Again, it doesn't take the responsibility off of me for acting a certain way, but maybe it's just I'm in this trigger that the whole lesson is you just got to create separation. Or maybe the other reason is maybe it is just 100% me. I have to change. I'm doing this all the time, right? This behavior, this an action, um, and I think it boils down to two things with us. We either respond out of aggression or respond out of shutting down. And that can be like passive aggressive manipulation or lying or deceit, or, we hide. And it's all out of one big umbrella thing, which is just fear. And so when I talk about self-love, it's like, did I act out of fear or did I act out of love? Right. Now, love might be brutally honest. Love might hurt someone's feelings once in a while. Fear might keep you in a relationship, might not be honest with someone, but it's not really acting out of actual love. Right. You're just lying. Right. And so I think that that's the thing is I try to focus on, and like, instead of so much self-forgiveness, it's like, am I behaving out of love or fear to myself or to another person? And I try to always, as much as I can, behave out of love. Doesn't mean I don't act out of fear. I do. I'm a human being. I will always be one. Um, but I think that's what I try to focus on. I think that's how you really, really get to a point of self-love, is like keeping yourself consistent in the choices you're making, the behaviors you're doing. And it's easier when you're around people that are emulating those behaviors or are people you look up to and you want to be like. So
I love that. Thank you for just being authentic. I can tell you are an amazing and loyal friend because you're on this show out of the kindness of your heart, because I asked you to be on here. So I appreciate you. This was a really amazing conversation. I can't wait for everybody to hear it. And yeah, thank you for all the wisdom you spread and just the realness you put out there in the world. I think we need more of it.
you're good at this, so keep it up. And it's been a great interview. I appreciate all the questions you asked, and you've done a wonderful job, and it's been fun to share a conversation with you.
Thank you so much, Nico. Make sure you guys check out his podcast, Starve the Ego, Feed the Soul.